Philip Ainsworth, aged 13, is accused of murdering a 12-year-old schoolfellow, Tommy Vincent. Philip's mother, Martha Ainsworth, is giving evidence for the prosecution.
A note on the humans who laugh at us. These must be dealt with individually. As an example, the boy Thomas Vincent laughs at us. The advantage we Rexers have over humans is that they need to breathe and we do not. Therefore, Thomas Vincent must be shown that we are supreme, because we do not need to breathe. This is an order. Destruct. Destruct.
Thank you, Mrs. Ainsworth. Will you wait there?
Mrs. Ainsworth, I have to ask you a number of questions, some of which may be upsetting. I do regret it, but it's unavoidable. Now, you tell us that your relationship with your son had been bad in recent years.
Yes.
Well, what sort of period of time is involved there?
Oh, well, that's difficult to remember. Perhaps 4 or 5 years.
5 years. That would be since the time of your divorce, would it not?
The divorce is over and done with now. I don't see there's any point in going
Since the time of your divorce, Mrs. Ainsworth.
Well, the divorce upset Philip naturally. It always does a child, but it was absolutely necessary, and things were a good deal easier all round. Afterwards, I got custody naturally. Philip didn't miss his father. He was always very severe with him, withdrawn.
What were the grounds for divorce, Mrs. Ainsworth?
My lord, I'm bound to ask if this is strictly necessary. Mrs. Ainsworth's divorce is obviously a painful memory for her, and hardly relevant.
No mistake. I must say I've never myself seen the point of opening up old wounds if it can be avoided.
With respect, my lord, Mrs. Ainsworth says she got custody of Philip naturally, and I was wondering if there was perhaps any legal battle between husband and wife which could have upset the child.
Yes, I think you could speak to that much, Mrs. Ainsworth.
No. No, as a matter of fact, no battle at all. My husband simply conceded custody, and that was the end of it.
You mean you would have preferred him to contest it?
I beg your pardon.
I think you heard the question, Mrs. Ainsworth. Would you have preferred it if your husband had fought you for custody of Philip and he had perhaps won?
You can't suggest... It's ridiculous.
I see. Now, as to Philip's preoccupation with the Rexers, did this date from about the same period, 5 years ago?
Oh, no, that was much more recently, 2 or 3 years ago.
But again, it was after the divorce. There's no question of that.
Look, it's absurd of you to keep on insisting that my divorce had anything to do with his invention of these absurd robots.
I'm not suggesting anything, Mrs. Ainsworth. I'm just asking you questions. You were concerned about the Rexer question so much that you took Philip to see Dr. De Quincey, a child psychiatrist.
Yes, that was 18 months ago.
And Dr. De Quincey said that you tell us that he found nothing wrong.
Nothing whatever.
How long was Philip attending Dr. De Quincey's clinic, Mrs. Ainsworth?
Well, that's hard to remember. Perhaps 3 months.
That would be how many individual sessions? Half a dozen? 8, perhaps?
No, 3. Yes, it would be 3, 1 a month.
Only 3 sessions to deal with what you regarded as a major sickness.
Look, I didn't regard it as anything at all. I was just worried. Dr. De Quincey failed to find anything wrong with Philip.
Did Dr. De Quincey want to see Philip again after these first 3 sessions?
Yes, he did say he thought there might be something else to be discovered.
But you chose not to take Philip along.
Look, it was a long way to go. Dr. De Quincey required me to go as well, and it meant putting the whole afternoon aside, and it was all getting nowhere.
How do you mean, Mrs. Ainsworth?
Well, the only effect these sessions seemed to have on Philip was to make him concentrate even harder on those stupid Rexers.
Philip was a burden to you, wasn't he?
No. I mean, all children make demands on their parents. It's only natural. It's just that with Philip, well, it was exceptional. You'd have had to have experienced it. I mean, right from the beginning, it was trouble.
From the very beginning? You mean from the day he was born?
I didn't say
Mrs.
that.
Ainsworth, did you actually want Philip when you conceived and bore him?
My lord, that question is entirely unjustifiable.
On the contrary, Mr. Lloyd, I find it completely irrelevant just at this point. We have a right to know as much as possible about the accused's domestic background.
My lord? Well, Mrs. Ainsworth, did you want Philip when you conceived and bore him?
It's ridiculous to talk about wanting and not wanting a child. It's never as easy as that. Gordon and I were very much in love. We thought a child might cement our marriage.
So the pregnancy was intended?
Naturally, what else?
Is that the whole truth, Mrs. Ainsworth?
Look, my lord, why do I have to answer all these questions? They've honestly nothing to do with this case.
That is for the court to decide, Mrs. Ainsworth, and his lordship is courteously reminding you that you are on oath.
I'm very well aware of that. It's just that you've got no right to ask these sort of questions. Gordon and I were never remotely suited to one another. It was all a mistake that we ever got married. Then I found I was pregnant. That meant there was a child to consider. That's awful. You try, but it just gets worse. Eventually Gordon went. Only he didn't take his son with him.
You are Dr. Malcolm Chisholm of Carver House, The Grove, Fulchester.
I am.
You are a practicing psychiatrist.
That is correct.
Will you tell the court your professional qualifications?
I am a doctor of medicine, specialising in child psychiatry, a part-time psychiatric consultant to Fordmore Prison Hospital, advising on the detention treatment of disturbed prisoners.
Have you had an opportunity to examine the accused in this case, Philip Ainsworth?
Yes. After his arrest, Philip Ainsworth was detained in custody, and I was asked to provide a psychiatric report on him. In all, I've had 5 sessions with him.
Which, in your view, were sufficient to give a reliable indication of the accused's state of mind?
Quite sufficient.
Well, perhaps you could tell us about those sessions, Doctor.
Yes, I first saw Philip Ainsworth on June the 15th, 11 days after the alleged offence. I had been called in specifically because the boy seemed to have lapsed into a withdrawn, incommunicative state, which from all accounts was getting worse.
Do you mean by that he was depressed, moody?
Well, nothing was very clear. The police surgeon was baffled because the symptoms you might expect to accompany depression or traumatic withdrawal weren't present. For instance, Philip was eating well and was physically active during recreation periods. He simply couldn't seem to communicate with his guardians in any meaningful sense. Now, it's to be remembered at this point, I think, that Philip had made no statement whatever to the police at the time of his arrest. He was discovered late in the evening of June the 4th, hiding in a wood. Neither then or at any other time has he said a word, either admitting or denying guilt to anyone. In fact, there was only one subject on which he could be persuaded to open his mouth at all: the Rexors.
Now, what was your general impression of Philip Ainsworth at the first session, Doctor?
At first I thought him stupid. He gave every indication of being intellectually below par, a subnormal creature caught up in some lurid, impossible fantasy. This impression was reinforced at the second and again at the third session. But of course by this time I'd learnt from other sources that Philip was actually a highly intelligent boy, good academically and nobody's fool. So I appreciated that something was seriously wrong.
Wrong with the accused, that's to say.
Wrong with me. It isn't entirely without precedent for the patient to pull the wool over the doctor's eyes, you know.
Are you saying, Dr. Chisholm, that in the sessions you had with him, Philip Ainsworth was attempting to deceive you?
I'm saying he very nearly succeeded. He gave a most convincing impersonation of a hapless idiot driven to blind violence on a schoolfellow by irrational compulsion.
But how is that possible, Doctor? Apart from anything else, a boy of 13 would hardly have the experience of life to carry off such an impersonation, would he?
Age doesn't come into it, nor, more surprisingly perhaps, does the kind of experience you speak of. There is a psychological reality known as the Ganser syndrome. It's named after Dr. Abel Ganser, who in 1898 discovered that under stress, certain kinds of people find the ability to impersonate hysterics. Ironically enough, Ganser made his discovery whilst observing prisoners awaiting trial. The signs are always the same: a display of extreme stupidity coupled with a total apparent lack of intellectual comprehension. Movement into the syndrome seems automatic. A person doesn't actually need to have observed hysterics to get the appearance right.
But if that's so, Doctor, how can you say with certainty in this case that Philip Ainsworth was faking hysteria and wasn't actually exhibiting signs of genuine mental disorder?
Books had been left for him to read. Philip affected no interest in them. At the fourth session, I left a copy of 1984, which was a book I'd been told by his teachers he particularly liked. What Philip didn't know, however, was that the pages had been coated with a chemical powder, which would show under later analysis whether or not they had been touched or turned. At the fifth session, I removed the book. Analysis showed that every page in the book had been fingered. It had been read through and through, every word. Philip Ainsworth was pretending neurosis, shamming.
Now, before counsel for the defence cross-examines you, Dr. Chisholm, there's something you might make clear for me. Are you saying that you think that the accused's entire fantasy about the Rexors, the robots coming to take over the Earth and so on, was a mere cloak for murderous intent?
No, my lord, the fantasy clearly grew up at an earlier time and then was found useful. Such elaborate inventions aren't abnormal in teenage boys.
Aren't abnormal?
No, complex and detailed worlds of the imagination are almost what you'd expect from intelligent youngsters. What went wrong here, I suggest, is that a jealousy, a hatred of the boy, Tommy Vincent, arose, and the accused saw a way of striking out at him under cover of fantasy or delusion.
And this assumed fantasy or delusion indicates to you, does it, that Philip knew perfectly well what he was doing at the time?
Yes.
Yes, I see. Proceed, Miss Tate.
My lord. Dr. Chisholm, you would say that it was not abnormal for a teenage boy to develop a murderous hatred of a fellow?
Well, let's say it happened. Tommy Vincent laughed at Philip Ainsworth. That's often extremely painful when you're only 13.
Yet a teenage boy who worked out a subtle plan for disposing of this hated schoolfellow, merely because he laughed at him, he must be accounted for as emotionally disturbed, surely.
Well, I haven't, of course, denied the presence of emotional disturbance in Philip Ainsworth. But my observation of the Ganser syndrome in the accused makes it pretty clear, I should have thought, that the basic sense of discretion remained unimpaired.
Your observation of the Ganser syndrome, Doctor, depends a lot on your planting of that particular book of yours, 1984, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And yet, can you swear that the accused actually read the book?
I'm sorry?
Well, all the fingerprints prove is that the book was handled, toyed with.
The finger marks are mainly at the bottom of pages and on every page, therefore indicating some form of systematic progress through the book.
Did you ask Philip Ainsworth if he'd read the book?
No, I didn't do that.
Why not? Were you so desperate to believe your trap had been sprung? What I'm saying is, you can't state categorically that the book was read. Now, can you, Doctor?
No, but it can't be
Thank
ignored.
you. That's all I wanted to know. Now, as to Philip Ainsworth's fantasy about the Rexers, these machines taking over mankind, now, did you not discover this to be a genuine conviction that the accused most passionately held?
That is the impression he tried to give, certainly. It is my judgment he was acting.
So the accused demonstrated one pattern of behavior and you chose to assume another?
Not chose to assume, reason to.
Well, you would accept, Doctor, would you, that it is possible occasionally for the patient to pull the wool over the doctor's eyes?
Yes.
Well, is it not possible, then, that you, Doctor, blinded yourself to the patient's true condition?
That is an impertinent question.
Well, such a thing has never happened in the entire history of psychological medicine.
Oh, many things have happened in the history of psychological medicine. Psychiatry has had to survive much mockery and contempt to become an acceptable science. I dare say it will survive yours.
No further questions, Doctor.
No re-examination.
You may stand down, Dr. Chisholm.
That completes the case for the prosecution, my lord.
I call the accused, my lord, Philip Ainsworth.
Just one moment. Miss Tate, if you wish the accused to give evidence, I must satisfy myself that he knows the difference between right and wrong.
My lord.
Now then, Philip, do you know what a lie is?
Yes, my lord.
Well, give me an example of a lie.
Saying I'd been at school when I stayed away.
Is it wrong to tell lies?
Yes.
Yes, very well, let him be sworn.
What is your religion?
Church of England.
Take the testimony in your right hand and read aloud the words on this card.
I promise before Almighty God to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Philip, when you were playing with Jane Langton and Tommy Vincent on June the 4th, did you go into an old hall on the Maplefield housing estate?
No, I didn't.
Now, Philip, you've just sworn to tell the truth.
Yes, my lord.
And that wasn't the truth, was it?
Yes, my lord.
But you did go into that hall.
No, my lord, I didn't go into the hall on that day. It was the Rector-in-Chief went into the hall that day. All the time it was the Rector-in-Chief doing things. Everything.
So it was the Rector-in-Chief who was doing things on June the 4th, Philip, and not you?
Yes.
Now, what can you recollect about that day?
Well, just vague things, not very clear.
Well, let's talk about them anyway. Now, Jane Langton has told us that she saw you tie Tommy Vincent to a pole and then secure a plastic bag over his head. Now, is that true?
The Rector-in-Chief only really wanted to frighten Tommy at first, for not taking him seriously.
Now, that isn't answering the question, Philip, is it? Is what Jane Langton told us she saw true?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, Jane then warned you that you might hurt Tommy, and you said, "I don't care, the Rexers are supreme."
The Rector-in-Chief is very angry at Tommy. Terribly angry.
Please, Philip, let us just establish the basic facts. We must know what you understand about what happened.
The Rector-in-Chief did it. That report that was read out from my diary, that was the Rector-in-Chief too. Not me. The Rector-in-Chief was there more and more all the time.
In spite of you, you mean, taking over your personality?
Yes.
Did you have any choice about this, Philip?
Choice? How do you mean choice?
Well, I mean, could you stop the Rector-in-Chief from taking over?
No, I couldn't do anything about that.
I see. Now, when Dr. Chisholm had his sessions with you, after you'd been arrested, did you understand?
No, it was bad all that time. Most of the time I didn't know what he was talking about.
Did Dr. Chisholm leave a book for you to read at a certain point in the session?
Yes, there was a book, that's right. 1984 it was.
And did you read it? Read it with understanding?
It was pretty hard reading just about that time. I'd read it before, so I think I remembered bits. What I knew was I had to pretend to finish it.
Now, why was that, Philip? Why did you have to pretend to finish it?
Because the doctor had left it for me. He must have meant for me to read it.
You were simply trying to be cooperative, to obey the doctor's orders?
Yes.
Now, I've now to ask you a few more personal questions, Philip. Tell me, have you been happy living with your mother? Now, please, Philip, I do need an answer to this.
It's been quite bad, really. When my father was at home, they were rows all the time. Since he's been gone, I can't seem to do anything right. That's the trouble. I can't do anything right for my mother.
Did you ever think that your mother never really wanted you, Philip? Now, please answer me, Philip. It's important, or I wouldn't ask you.
Yes.
Now, when exactly did you invent the Rexers, and can you remember why?
The Rexers. I started to make up about the Rexers 2 years ago. I don't know why for sure. There'd been something in my head for a long time about robots. Not robots that are sort of like people, or the way they are in comics sometimes, but robots that are more like themselves, machines.
Machines, yes. Now, you have a very high regard for machines, don't you, Philip?
Machines are good, better than people.
Better than people?
Yes.
In what way?
Machines can't get hurt, can they? Even if they get smashed up or broken. They don't hurt, don't have pain. But people do, so machines are better. They're not so weak.
Were the Rexers ever able to think, Philip?
No, they were just machines. Machines can't think.
And on the day that you tied Tommy Vincent to the pole and secured the plastic bag over his head, you genuinely believed that you were the Rexer-in-Chief?
Yes.
I see, Philip, thank you. Stay there.
Well, Philip, an extraordinary delusion, this Rexall business of yours. Totally compelling while it lasted, but now conveniently gone away.
I'm not sure it's all gone away yet. I'm still a bit mixed up in my head about it. It's just better now, that's all.
It's not likely to cause the deaths of any more innocent schoolfellows, eh? Philip, why did you hate Tommy Vincent so much?
I didn't hate him, sir.
Oh, come on now, you were always quarrelling, weren't you? At school, when you met at home?
No, that's only what Jane thought. She got...
Philip, why don't you just admit it? You disliked Tommy Vincent intensely. You hated him.
Well, he wouldn't let me alone, not ever. He was always laughing at me.
At you? Laughing at you?
Yes, all the time, every day practically.
Now that's strange, because I thought it was the Rexor-in-Chief he laughed at.
That was later on, when I began to know properly about the Rexor-in-Chief. I just meant to say...
Yes, Philip, I think we all know what you meant to say, but you fluffed your lines, didn't you? You forgot your words. I think these are faults that we all understand in relation to acting.
I'm not acting, sir, I'm
Dr.
not.
Chisholm thinks you are. Dr. Chisholm thinks you have been all along.
Well, Dr. Chisholm doesn't understand. He only got the idea I was acting because of his trick with that stupid book.
Ah, yes, that copy of 1984 that you solemnly and systematically pretended to read.
Because I thought Dr. Chisholm wanted me to.
Yet you touched every single page, Philip. You made marks throughout the entire book. And that was only a pretence.
I tried to read it.
Yes, of course. But you still haven't said why you hated Tommy Vincent.
I tell you, I didn't hate Tommy Vincent. It was just that he was such a big fool.
A big fool?
Yes. He couldn't be told about anything. He wouldn't understand about machines. Of course they're better than people. Of course they're taking over the world. It isn't just make-believe about the Rexers. One day, soon, we'll all have to make up our minds which side we're on.
The case of the Queen against Ainsworth will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court.